Good afternoon, everybody. All right, I'm gonna put someone from the other class shared this link, and you might already have it already. I want to share it with you. Okay, and I'll probably share it again when everybody else comes in. This is good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is the official Georgia Milestones Assessment Study Guide booklet. So I put the link in the chat for you to look at. It's a very long booklet, a lot of extra stuff in it, but it's good to give a look through on some background information. Let me see something. All right, it doesn't have a date on it, so it's just a general booklet, so it doesn't necessarily reflect this year's topics or questions. But they do have explanations and answers to all of their questions. So look at the explanations, because especially for the questions on ecology, they will help you understand why a question should be answered the way it does, which is what I'm trying to do with you all with the worksheet that we have. So just know that that's a booklet that the Georgia Milestones website will give to you, Department of Education. All right, that being shared, we need to get back to our worksheet, which is also a Georgia Milestone Study Guide. And we left off on question 44, I believe. So that's where we'll be. And again, if we don't get through this whole thing, which I don't think we will, I didn't get through the whole thing with the other class either. Get it? The answers are at the end of the worksheet. Now, keep in mind, you could skip to just looking at the answers and pay me no mind. I wish you wouldn't. But because I'm trying to explain to you why the answers are so. But the answers to all the questions are at the end of the worksheets, just in case we don't get as far as we would like to. All right, so yesterday we stopped at, come on, we stopped here. And then I also share with you that you will be allowed some scratch paper at the exam. You can't take notes into the exam with you, but you will be allowed scratch paper. And I strongly encourage that you draw the Punnett squares out. This one is a dihybrid cross. Again, and you need to remember that both the top and the side will need to have two sets of, so you'll have to have a Y and an R at the top and a Y and R in your sets at the on the side. Okay, and I believe we got through that question, and the answer for that was 3 out of 8. Was C, 3 out of 8. All right, so that's where we stopped yesterday. We'll start here at 46. An organism. Anybody else need to come in before I start? We are missing a handful of people. All right, an organism is living in a rapidly changing environment. Sexual reproduction is advantageous to organisms in this situation because B is the correct answer. Sexual reproduction produces offsprings with more variation. Here comes somebody. Some of which may be better adapted to a new environment. All right. Asexual reproduction just produces the same characteristics over and over and over again. And if it's necessary to adapt to the environment, those organisms are not going to have the genes to do that. So they are more likely to die off. Sexual reproduction, remember, you can get one chromosome can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Independent assortment, which means you can get one chromosome as opposed to getting another chromosome, so you can get some variation. And hopefully in that variation, you have a stronger characteristic, which will give you a better chance to survive your environment or changes to the environment. Remember, the law for ecology is survival of the fittest. One of the ways to be the survival of the fittest is to adapt. And a lot of times you need to adapt genetically. Once you adapt genetically, that new adaptation is passed on to the next generation. All right, 47. Hydra. Hydra are little microscopic organisms that look like little octopus, or more like a squid, but really teeny tiny. These organisms can reproduce sexually or asexually, meaning that they do have male and female hydra, but they also can do something which is called budding. They can actually just grow another organism off their side of them, and it'll pinch off and become a new organism. So that's asexual. A particular population of hydra is widely distributed in a large, stable environment. In this situation, it is more advantageous for the hydra to reproduce which way? And in this case, the key word here is this is a stable environment. It's not harsh. They don't have to adapt to any changes. So the answer is A, asexually. It requires less energy to reproduce asexually as opposed to having to find a mate, having to have sexual reproduction, and so on and so forth. So in a stable environment, the process of asexual reproduction, which is budding in their case, is more advantageous. Asexual, now 48, asexual reproduction provides an advantage to organisms under which of the following conditions? And it's D, there's a decrease in resources available in the habitat. So if there's less resources, that means they don't have a lot of food to get energy. So they need a low energy type of reproduction to survive. Asexual would be the advantage in this case. All right, and then stop me if I need to re-explain something that didn't make sense to you and you need to hear the explanation again. All right, an organism living in a rapidly changing environment. Sexual reproduction is advantageous. So this is the flip side to the question above. And A is the answer. If the offspring reproduce sexually and they grow to maturity more rapidly than those asexually. Okay. Again, the environment is changing, so the organism needs to have some variety and the ability to adapt to its conditions. So A is the correct answer for that. All right, 50. While providing advantages, asexual reproduction presents which of the following disadvantages for sexually reproducing organisms? And A is the answer. Again, it's the opposite of this one. This one, finding a mate requires energy. Having sexual reproduction requires energy. So it is a disadvantage in harsh situations. All right. This is a phylogenetic tree, and we looked at these. And the thing that you need to remember is the branches that are closest together are the most closely related. Okay, so it says which pairs are most closely related. So we could say that so if you look at this one, sharks and rays are closely related. Amphibians, you might say they're closely related to primate, but if you look at the primate branch, it also branches off with another group of rodents and rabbits. So your choice for most closely related would be the branch that has a branch coming off of it. And that would be C, your primates and rodents. So again, which the branches that are closest related are the one are closest to each other are the ones that are closely related. Oh, I see a cat. All righty. 52. Everybody understood that? So again, you've got to remember the rules. In this case, looking at this is a rule. The ones that are closest relate together are the most closely related. All right, looking at this table, you have characteristics of an organism. So this organism has a nucleus. This organism does not have chloroplast. So it tells you that it can't be a plant, can't be a green plant because it has um, no chloroplast. It has cell walls, but they're made of chitin, and it gets its nutrition by it's a heterotroph, which means it gets it from outside. It's not plants again get their are self-feed themselves. Okay, or the nutrition is they make their own food. So again, we know this is not a plant. So B is out, and um, it has cell walls, so A is out because animal cells don't have cell walls. So then your choice is between protista and fungi. And protista are more like animals, but so the answer for this one is fungi. Fungi have they're plants, so they have cell wall, but they're not green plants. Okay, so they've been branched off from that group because of that characteristic. So the answer for this one is D, fungi. And again, like I said, if you don't know the answer to these, we call this educated guess. You guess by going through each of the characteristics and eliminating what it can and cannot be. Which of the following characteristics of a eukaryotic cell, those are the ones that have a nucleus in the middle, is used to support the theory that they evolved from the union of free living cells? And that is the presence of a mitochondrial DNA. In order to evolve like that, you need mitochondria is your energy organelle, and then because it has parts to it, it also has DNA. So the cells that have the mitochondrial DNA are the evidence for the eukaryotic cells. And mitochondria is a membrane-bound organelle. That is one of the characteristics of eukaryotic cells. None of the rest of these describe anything to do with membrane-bound organelles. Okay, so mitochondria is, therefore that is the answer. All right, 54. You have the classification. Again, you need to make sure that you know the mnemonic create a mnemonic for knowing the categories in order. They didn't give you all of them here, but it's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So it could be kindly please close our front gate, sir, something like that. Or was it King Philip did something? I don't know that one as well. But remember one of those so that you know them in order. For this one, so they notice kingdoms have a lot of organisms in it, and then phylums, there are different phyla. So they've broken this down into the chordata. Chordata means they have bone structures. Then they skipped down to genus and species. Genus and species, you need to remember that organisms have a system of two-word naming. It's called binomial nomenclature. And they use the genus name, which is a capital letter, and the species name, which is a lowercase letter, in order to name an organism. In the genus category, we have a house cat and a lynx. And then we eliminate that when we get down to species, because species is only one kind of organism. then that is the cat. So the animal that is closest related to the cat is going to be your lynx because they have the same genus name. They did different species, but same genus. So they are the most closely related. Same last name, so to speak, but different individual. Okay. All righty. An organism that has the following characteristics. It has membrane-bound nucleus. So again, it's a eukaryote. It's multicellular, so it's not a single-celled organism. It does not carry out photosynthesis, so it's not a plant because plants carry out photosynthesis. It has no cell wall, so again, it's not a plant, and it reproduces sexually. So with those characteristics, going through all of those, we're limited to saying that this is an animal. Okay, this one organism belongs to the animal kingdom. We already did what the characteristics was fungi was, and they have cell walls. So this one says no cell walls. Bacteria and eubacteria are single celled, and this said it's multicellular. So that's how you eliminated that one. So animal was the answer for that. Which of the following will provide the best evidence to support the claim that two organisms have common ancestry? And we talked about that already. They will have similar anatomical features. Anatomical means body parts. They have limbs, and we did an exercise with that as well, where all of the arms or legs look similar. They might be shorter or longer, but they are similarity in anatomical features. All right. This is a tree, but this one is for plants and not animals. All right, so you start at the bottom. The original ancestor is an algae. Those are those microscopic green, one single cell green plants that you see floating around in the water. All right. And then the circle things tell you what has happened along the way. So in the first one, it says they are land plants. And so it's divided into the liverworts and mosses. And then we go in a different direction that those are vascular. Vascular, for us, our vascular system is arteries and veins and capillaries. Plants have a vascular system too, and they're called xylem and phloem, and that they conduct the water and food up and down the stem of a plant. Okay, so they do have a vascular system, and that's how the water gets in the plant. Remember, yesterday we talked about you can water from the top all day long, and the water will just bead off the leaves because they're waxy. So they actually get their water and their food supply by their vascular system. And so then it goes on to show you that there are some are ferns, and then another adaptation is they have the seeds appear, and then we get up to the flowering plant. So this is how this is diversified. So then the question is, based on the diagram, what is the most recent evolutionary development? That means they evolved. So they evolved from being single-celled algae into being complex what? And that would be bee flowering plants because they've got the most distant branch. Flowering plants are the most sophisticated or the most recent evolutionary development. They've evolved. And these plants, because they have seeds, are sexually reproducing. Ferns have spores, so they are asexual. They just drop a spore on the ground and then it creates a new plant. But when you get to this part with seeds, those are sexually reproducing plants. Oh, and it's not seed plants because when you branch off from seed plants, you still have the flowering plant. So that's the furthest dot on this diagram. All right, same principle on this one. It is most reasonable to expect the greatest similarities in anatomical structure with which two groups? And that would be 4 and 5 because they're the closest together. In fact, it kind of looks like 5 stems off of 4. They do have 3 and 4, but then 4 is closer to 5 than it is to 3. So of the choices, I don't like that they included that choice, but 4 and 5 would be your best answer on this one. All right, this time they're giving you specific organisms, and the same thing with this one. You're looking for the greatest similarities. In this case, the similarity that they're looking at, which ones are likely to have body hair. So as we go up, they start off with the fact that they all have a backbone, but some of them have, like the shark and the the fin fish, they have cartilage, which is like what you have in your nose and your ear. It supports, but it's flexible. Then you have the bony skeletons that go up from there. Actually, the shark is the one with the cartilage. Bony skeletons are everybody else, but the ones that are going to have bony skeletons and hair are going to be your primates and rodents. The rodent is off the same branch as the primate, and that's because they both have hair. Okay, everybody else is still a bony skeleton, but they're not, that's the only relationship they seem to have. All right, so C, branch C, they're going to be related because they have body hair. All right, 60. All right, when you're looking at this one, you're looking at that solid line again. This represents 5 different organisms, and the appearance of trait X came along the way right in the middle of that line. Okay, so based on the information on the diagram, which best represents organisms that will exhibit trait X. So there's a mutation that took place, and everything after that spot is going to have trait X. So that's 3, 4, and 5. Okay. All right, 61. Unlike living cells, a virus requires what in order to replicate? The controversy with a virus is it can replicate. But when we talked about way back at the beginning, we had an acronym MISGRIN, and those are all of the characteristics that something has to do in order to be living. It has to be able to reproduce, it has to be able to get its own nutrition, it has to be able to maintain homeostasis, and all the letters from MISGRIN are all of the 7 characteristics that they need to carry out respiration. And virus can do most of those things, except it cannot reproduce by itself. They make copies of themselves because they have a host. They have DNA or they have RNA, one of the two, and they inject it into another living thing. And that living thing makes a copy of them. So when a virus attacks you, it injects its DNA into your cells, and your cells do all the hard work of making a copy of that virus. And that's how you get infected, because your cells are replicating the DNA from the virus that just infected you. So it needs a host. It cannot replicate without a host. All right, but otherwise once it's replicated, it can do almost anything that a living thing can do. 62, the difference between bacteria and viruses. And again, it's B, bacteria are living organisms, so they can replicate themselves by themselves, and viruses are not. All right, 63. Which of the following best describes the difference between genetic material of a virus and a bacteria? It's kind of like they keep asking the same question. Viruses have less genetic material. So again, they do have DNA or RNA, but they're only going to have a small little bit, because all they need to do is have information about how am I going to make this virus. They don't have to make a whole organism. So other cells have long strands of DNA because they have to make a lot of things. The virus is only going to give you information on how to make a virus. So it has less genetic material than the bacteria would have. All right, 64. Which of the following statements correctly describes the similarity between virus and bacteria reproduce? And that would be D, to have a copy of the entire genetic material before reproducing. So again, in order to make a bacterial cell, you need to know how to make all the parts of a bacteria. So it needs all of the genetic information, not just a little tiny piece. All right. Kind of feel like they kind of beat that question to death. All right. Which of the following statements correctly describes the energy use and growth of viruses and bacteria? We're still on that. It is viruses do not use energy and don't grow. Bacteria use energy to grow. And again, the virus just has to it replicates. So all the little, it may seem like the viruses are growing, but they're just making a bunch of little viruses inside your cell. And what they do is they break out, they destroy the cell that they're in, and so that they can go attack another cell. So that's all they do. The presence of that virus is going to cause the cell that made them to deteriorate, and then they go and attach themselves to another living thing and make some more viruses. All right, and this question, you kind of have to ignore this question. It doesn't have a graph. It says the graph below shows, and there is no graph. But they will, if they have graphs, they're usually, can you read the graph questions? So the information, all you have to do is know how to read a graph and know that there's information on the x-axis and then on the x-axis on the bottom, y-axis across the side. Know what those pieces of information are, and you can run your finger along the graph in order to figure out what the answer is. So questions about graphs always have the answer on the graph. Okay, so you ignore this particular one because there is no graph, but that's how you would answer a graph question. All right, which of the following observations would lead to classify a gopher tortoise as a keystone species in Georgia? Keystone species means that it's important to the environment. What it does in that environment is important to other things. So the answer to this question is A, they create habitats for hundreds of other species by digging underground burrows. In other words, what they do allows other organisms to have some place to live. The holes that they leave behind, other organisms live in there too. So they are helpful. None of the other things really are helpful for helping anything but the turtle itself. Okay, so A is a behavior that creates something for other organisms to take advantage of. And that's what a keystone species does. So we're running into some of the ecology questions. We haven't done the unit on ecology. So again, I would go back and read over that unit kind of quickly so that you can pick, or at least look at the vocabulary. Vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. If you know what the words mean, you can answer the question. So again, knowing what the term keystone species is will help you answer that question. All right, this lovely little fish here is a small fish that lives in fresh water. It says, which is a limiting factor for the fish. Limiting factor is also the vocabulary word you means what are the conditions it must have to live, and if that particular situation was taken away, it would probably die. And the answer to this one is the volume of water in the body of water in which the fish lives. In other words, if there was a little bit of water, fish have to have a certain amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. So if there's not a lot of water, even though there's present in the water, they can still die because they wouldn't be able to breathe, because they're not only, because we sometimes think that's the water that's helping them, but it's the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water that they breathe. Okay, so if it's a little bit of water, a little bit of oxygen, they can't breathe, they will die. All right, so this is another can you read the graph question, but this question also requires that you understand the term carrying capacity. In an environment, there's all kinds of things that the organism needs to survive. And as long as all of the organisms that are there are not using them all up, they will survive. Okay, so carrying capacity means how many organisms can I have with the amount of resources that I have, and everybody survives and everybody's happy. If we get to a point where we have more organisms than we have resources, then things start to die. All right, so we're looking at this graph. The answer to this question, um, yeah, it would be easy. I don't know. This might be a colored graph. It could be. I don't know. But sometimes they will. Like they keep looking at that booklet. I don't know. We just looked at, let me go back here for a minute. These didn't have, I didn't see a whole lot of colored diagrams on this either. Um, this is like what you call them, key. So no, I don't know that they would have colored pictures or color graphs. If this sample is in the same format as the way they would write the questions, then I guess the answer would be no. But it would be bigger. It would be bigger, so it'd be easier to see because they probably you're going to get a booklet, and so all of these little graphs and things will be bigger, so they would be easier to see that way. I tried to enlarge it as much as I could, but this is as big as it'll let me go. But so I guarantee that the picture will be bigger than what it is on this paper. All right, so looking at this question, carrying capacity. So it's going to be organism species 4 because, and then the way we read this is that we look at once they get to about 100, maybe 110, they start to level off. So that means we can't, this environment can't hold any more than that without them um, starting to die off. This graph would start going down if it was more than that particular species needed to survive. So they're okay at that level. And then when we look at number 3, you can have more of number 3. They don't start to level off until like maybe 175. And that's population size. Species 2, you can have almost 300 of them in this environment, and then they start to level off. So they can keep growing and growing and growing until we get to about there. And then you might have more than that will cause too many people eating and using up all the resources, and then it will go down. Species number 1, you can have a lot of them, more than 400 of those in this particular environment. They haven't reached their carrying capacity yet because it hasn't plateaued. Okay, so the plateau is carrying capacity. That's the limit. That's as many of those organisms as you can have without them dying. Okay, right now they're still sharing the resources, or you might have as many dying off as are present, so that the amount of resources that are present are enough for everybody to be okay. All right, number 70. Which of the following environmental changes lead to the greatest loss in biodiversity in the habitat? Biodiversity means a variety of species. So the thing that will lead to the biggest loss in variety of species is forest deforestation in a rainforest. Rainforests have the biggest amount of biodiversity, and when we start cutting the trees down, not only are we cutting the tree down, but the tree is home to all kinds of other plants and animals. I was sharing with the other class that one of my favorite movies is called Medicine Man. It had Sean Connery in it. He used to be James Bond, but that's way before your time. But the movie was about them doing cancer research. He was in the forest trying to find the cure for cancer. And the plant that he was studying was only found at the top of the tree. And then eventually, but in the middle, towards the end of the movie, this company decided they were going to come in and chop all the trees down, and he hadn't finished his research yet. So there's different bugs. And then it turned out that it was the ants feeding on the sugar in the flower. So there were the ants, the flower, the tree, all of those different things are destroyed when you cut down that one set of tree. So deforestation, and the monkeys, all the other things that live in the tree, they have no home. So when just cutting down trees cuts out a whole lot of organisms, not just the tree. All right, 71. Energy that the animal needs to carry out its life functions and is released when the cell is complete. Which of the following functions? And that's A, breaking down carbon-based molecules. All right, so if you remember that glucose is what we get our energy from, and glucose has those carbon molecules and it's C6H12O6. And so that's where we're getting it from. It's not from the water. We don't get any energy from water. Definitely don't get it from waste products. And um, this is molecules, but it doesn't say what molecules, so that's out. But it's definitely carbon-based. Glucose gives you energy. All right, 72. This is called a trophic pyramid. Trophic means how it's feeding levels. And it's done as a pyramid because the thing that we have the most of on the planet is plants. The producers are the largest number of organisms on the planet. And they make their own food. They get all their energy from the sun and make their own food. There are more of them than anything else on the planet. Next, we have our organisms. Everything else has to eat from outside. They don't make their own food. So there's three different levels. There's primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. The primary consumers eat the plants. So they get all their energy from eating producers. Okay. The secondary consumers eat the primary consumers. So they could be eating, and they could be what we call the herbivores, where they eat plants as well. But the tertiary consumers usually only eat animals. Okay, so they eat the secondary consumers. So the one above feeds on the one below. Now, what this question is asking, each one has a certain amount of energy available to it. You can cheat. You could calculate this with a calculator, but you don't really need to do that. If you have the understanding that each level is going to lose a certain amount of energy. So what you're looking at is, because it's not going to be these numbers all the time, and more, sometimes they give you a number like 1,000, and then the next level has 100, and then the next level has 10, and then the top level has 0.1. And the point being is that while the producers get 100% of their energy from the sun, they need the plants are going to use some of that energy for all of their functions. So when the primary consumer eats it, only 10% of the energy it got is available. So this number that's above, this 0.65, um, is bigger than this 0.60 or 0.60. I'm going to say 0.16. Okay, so that's almost 90% less than the one before it. And then the next level, this is 0.4. So this is 90% less than the one before it. So they're asking you, what do you think the amount of energy is going to be available for the tertiary consumer? And it's going to be less than our 0.4. And we don't want it to be too big or too little, but it's going to be A, because we need to be less than, so looking at your decimals, B is too small and D is too big, but A is just right. Okay. All right, so again, you're looking at the theory that energy is lost as you go up the pyramid, and it's lost, or when I say lost, it's not available to the thing that is doing the eating. because the organism that it's eating used up some of the energy for its life functions. Okay, so if I eat 100% get 100% of a hamburger, I'm going to use it to replace my cells, to run my heart, and do all the things. So if somebody ate me, they're only going to get 10% of the energy that I had. Okay, a little graphic, but that's the rule that goes with this. All right, how does photosynthesis contribute to the carbon cycle? Remember, that's part of our equation, and it's going to move carbon from the atmosphere to the biosphere. So what it's doing is there's carbon dioxide in the air. The plant takes in carbon dioxide. It actually has little opening and closing vessels in the leaf, so it is able to breathe, take in the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then it makes it part of the plant. So that is part of our biosphere. Okay, it is not going from the soil to the water, so that's what it's saying with a hydrosphere. It is not going from the atmosphere to the soil because it's going to the plant and not the soil. And it's not going from the soil to the atmosphere, which would imply that it um, it evaporated from the soil, and it's not going to do that. So B is the correct answer there. Once it takes it in from the atmosphere, it is incorporated into the plant, which is part of the biosphere. All right, this is a food web, and a food web is all of the possible feeding relationships in an environment. So it's kind of similar to our triangle like this. Again, it started with a producer at the bottom, which is our plants, and then it goes up to who eats who. That's what this is as well. All the plants are at the bottom. So we have acacia trees, we have red oak tree grass, and we have star grass. And then we have arrows that extend from those to what eats it. And then we have, so all the level, like grasshopper, the termite, the harvester, and all of those are um, vegetarians. They all eat grass or plants. And then the ones above that are um, secondary consumers because they're going to eat the organisms that ate the producers. So that's how you look at a food web, except with a food web, you've got a lot of possibilities. For example, our termite is eaten by the wildebeest, but it's also eaten by impalas. So that's how you have to read that. Who all is eating what? Okay. So they're asking you in this one, which trophic level includes the greatest amount of energy stored? And they give you all that picture. And the only thing you have to remember is plants have 100% of the energy. Everybody else is going to have less energy than the one on the bottom. So the red oak, and they could have easily put the acacia tree or the star tree, but they didn't. They just put one plant. All the rest of these are animals, and they're going to have less energy, stored energy, than a plant. Okay? All right, and that's all you have to remember about that. And again, to read this, these are feeding relationships. So you just need to know that the arrow points to what eats it. All right, which of the following is a mechanism by which phosphorus in the soil enters the biosphere? Phosphorus is a solid, it's not a gas, so it's not going to evaporate and go into the atmosphere. So it's incorporated by the plant from the soil and is absorbed. And then when the plant dies, it returns it back to the soil. So it's going to be utilized by a plant and consumed by an animal. And that's how it's going to get in the biosphere. Okay, it's going to be taken up by the soil, by the plant. And again, animals are not going to get this out of the soil. It has to be incorporated into the plant, then the animal eats the plant, and then the animal dies and puts it back in the soil. All right. Which of the following would indicate the greatest problem of health in the ecosystem? Um, Okay, lack of biodiversity would be A. The ecosystem has very few kinds of plants and animals. So if you have a limited number of organisms, if anything should happen to any one of them, that upsets the whole ecosystem. So when you have a variety of things doing a variety of things in an ecosystem, chances are if you lose one, it doesn't destroy the whole ecosystem. Okay? All right, and we're out of time, aren't we? All right, so good luck tomorrow. Good luck, study, but don't study too hard. Get some rest, and just know that you're intelligent individuals and you're going to do fine. So good luck. I know I won't see you tomorrow, but good luck. Bye. We went way past time.